Well, the big change that's happened actually over the last 20 years, the expansion of cable television created the biggest single expansion for documentary. The streaming services are complementary, but they're building on top of what the cable expansion has already done globally. And I'm involved in the global documentary television industry. I've been in almost all the continents, actively working, and as a broadcaster and commissioner. What's happened in the last 20 years, again, what happened with the expansion of cable television is it drove documentary from being a very niche activity to mainstream. And that's had the good effect because it brings more money with it, but more money brings a lot of other people. And what's happened is that documentaries have become popular. And what's happening more and more is documentaries are subject to the tyranny of the narrative. The more popular they become, the more there is pressure to make them more popular. Mm-hmm. And, unfortunately, entertainment becomes dominant, as it has in news and current affairs. There's a lot of news channels that actually don't do news, they do opinion. Mm. And so there's more weight given to conflict, to shock and outrage. Mm. There's the temptation there because if you have outrageous opinions and lots of conflict, you'll get an audience. And if you have a reasoned argument like on global economics, you'll get a smaller audience. And also there's also a drive towards more activism versus evidence.
Yeah.
More documentary, a branch of documentaries that see themselves as, instead of documenting what's happening in the world, having a particular point of view and finding the evidence that supports that point of view. So the constant battle to get filmmakers to base their work on evidence and not their own prejudices or biases or their own activist desires, even if they're completely worthy. Mm. I've always said, my mantra has been in public television, our job is not to make the world a better place. Our job is to provide a wide diversity of opinions, fact-based, so that the audience can make the informed decision and decide how they'll respond in their communities, on elections, on what they buy or not buy. That our job is to inform the public, not to drive them to a particular point of view. So there's the tyranny of the narrative. Well-constructed stories sell better than essays. Yeah. Even though they might be less informative, often are less informative. And there's also a drive to one particular perspective or another. It's polemics as opposed to evidence. Yeah. And that good reasoned arguments, like they're not the mainstream. But yet when we provide an alternative, like we have series on physics, astronomy, mathematics. They're incredibly popular on our channel. Mm. But that's one of the only places here in Canada you'll find them. And that's because that part of the audience is so starved for that kind of quality. Where most people want to be entertained. They don't really want to be informed, or they want their biases and prejudices reinforced. Good, I believe you agree. Good, fine. That's really, at the same time they become popular, the popularity has been one of the dangers, because sometimes it's more important to make something entertaining than it is informative. And what we see now, when I started, making documentaries, people would, we'd have a premiere and people would say, "That's a nice documentary. That's really good. I learned a lot. When are you going to make a real film?" And they didn't mean it as an insult. They just thought, a documentary isn't a real film. A real film is a fiction film in a theater. It gives you an idea of where I began, that people thought that way. Now that it's mainstream, you find that more and more documentaries that are popular, say on Netflix, are about movie stars and sports stars, whether it's world football, national basketball. So it's about celebrities, about stars, sports stars, movie stars. And it's more and more, it's the movie establishment, like a lot of Hollywood companies also produce documentaries, usually about other Hollywood personalities. So it's drawn in these folks who take a lot of money and attention, even though none of that work, or very little of the work, has been notable beyond the initial publicity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been the danger. With its popularity comes the movie stars and the sports stars and everybody doing everything. The other thing that I've really noticed going forward is that as the Oscars demonstrated just a few days ago, feature films are no longer at the cultural vanguard.
Mm.
They're like, at one time jazz was popular music, now it's niche.
Mm.
Opera was popular entertainment, now it's niche. It's boutique. It's no longer the mainstream form. It's now just an art form. So it takes its place along with the other arts. Television has been dominant for a long time.
Mm.
You talk to people in the office the next day, nobody talks about a movie they went to see on the weekend. They talk about something they streamed or watched on television. And as the dominance of television happens, the single feature-length documentary has disappeared in importance. It's good for getting awards at festivals, but the audience gravitates to series, usually limited series, 4 parts, 6 parts, 10 parts. That's become the completely dominant form. And it allows people, on the one hand, at the industrial level, it allows you to create a lot of product. Because in television, somebody says, great, I've got a good idea for a 6-parter, and we're always going, really? Can you make it 8 or 10? Whether it deserves it or not. So that's one problem. But the other advantage is you can all of a sudden get into primary stories, you can expand the secondary stories, you can expand the related stories, you can provide a lot more texture. And a lot of the histories and limited series, a lot of the subjects that we commission are more and more like going, hey, this is better as 4 1-hours or 6 1-hours, to jam it all into a feature-length documentary. Like, why? Well, I know why. Filmmakers, you don't get invited to a film festival for a 4-part documentary series. You don't win an Oscar for a 4-part documentary series. You can't stand in front of an audience and thank your mother for a documentary series. That's only so filmmakers are driven to that. Mm-hmm. But that's about them and their work. That's not about the audience. And that's what I've seen. It's like, the real success is in television. Sometimes people aren't aware of it because they, you watch the Oscars and hey, that's, you see those and go, oh, that's great, but that isn't what they watch at home.